The Justice Party's ideology was rooted in the Non-Brahmin Manifesto that was published in 1916 by the South Indian People's Association. The manifesto pledged the loyalty of non-Brahmins to the British colonial government and rejected the national freedom movement and the Home Rule movement under Annie Besant. The manifesto was criticized by The Hindu, a nationalist newspaper at the time, and The New Age, the Home Rule movement's newspaper. The Justice Party, like the Muslim League, was against the freedom struggle and opposed the idea of self-government and freedom from British rule. They openly supported British rule and did not believe in a united India. The Justice Party did not participate in the Central Legislative Assembly, which was the national parliamentary body at the time, and instead focused on obtaining communal representation and participating in the political process from 1916 to 1920. Esteemed guests, pleasant evening to each and every one of you. I am deeply honored to have the privilege of addressing you tonight, courtesy of Sangam Talks. For extending this gracious invitation to me, it's an immense honor to stand before this audience, and thank you all for gracing this occasion with your presence. On this occasion, I would like to undertake a detailed analysis of the Justice Party of Madras Presidency with the aim of unraveling the myths around it. I will delve into the historical background, its political ideology, its electoral performance, its governance track record, in the hope that its true legacy will be rightly re-evaluated. Dravidian leaders and sympathizers who proudly proclaim themselves as champions of social justice hail the Justice Party as a symbol of oppressed people's struggle. However, a closer examination of its history reveals that the party's origins were rooted in animosity and a desire for revenge. Whenever the Justice Party is brought up, whose name is the first that comes to mind? Anybody in the audience? So, it's true, this is E.V. Ramasamy Nayakar. For those of you who do not know, his ardent supporters address him as Periyar. But this story doesn't begin with him. It begins with these two individuals. Is anyone familiar with them? So I will tell you who they are. The Justice Party was established by T.M. Nair and P.T. Tyagaraj Chettiar, who were previously members of the Congress Party. The two leaders had in fact not been on speaking terms with each other before they established the party. This was due to a disagreement in the Madras Corporation Council regarding the administration of temples. At the council meeting, Nair had argued that temples should pay water tax since they earned significant income. But Tyagaraya opposed the idea. In another incident, Nair had suggested that the Tiruvallikeni Parthasarathi temple pond be filled with sand and turned into a park due to a mosquito infestation. Nair proposed a resolution to fill the pond and create a park in its place for the sake of public health. However, Tyagaraya opposed the resolution and took a leading role in defeating it during the corporation meeting, arguing that the pond should instead be renovated. This difference of opinion led the two leaders to stop speaking with each other. So if that's the backstory, what motivated the two of them to come together to form the Justice Party? Well, T.M. Nair had served as the elected representative of the Tiruvallikeni constituency in Madras Corporation for 3 consecutive terms, starting from 1904. He was also the presiding officer at the 1907 North Arcot Congress Conference held in Chittoor. But in 1916, when he ran for the Imperial Legislative Assembly in the same constituency, he suffered a shocking defeat. He attributed his loss to the Brahmin population in the area, which prompted him to form a non-Brahmin party. So what about Tyagaraja Chettiar? Well, he too had also been associated with the Congress. He once made a donation of over 10,000 rupees for the Kumbhabhishekam ceremony of the Mylapore Kapalishwarar temple. Now, at that time, 10,000 rupees was a lot of money. Upon arriving at the event, he was not allowed to sprinkle holy water at the ceremonial dais, despite his donation, on account of him not being ritually trained to partake in this specific custom. This was the case even with temples not run by Brahmins. But he was outraged when a Brahmin who worked under him was permitted to do so. Feeling insulted by this perceived caste arrogance, he was motivated to form a non-Brahmin party. This is how Chetty and Nair came together to form the Justice Party. On 20th November 1916, the two leaders joined forces to establish the South Indian Liberal Foundation, or SILF, in Chennai's Veperi locality. They also launched a newspaper called Justice, which eventually gave the party its popular name, the Justice Party. Now, both T.M. Nair and P.T. Tyagaraja Chettiar were wealthy and educated, and they started the non-Brahmin party not for the cause of social justice, but due to personal grievances. The Justice Party would not have come into existence if T.M. Nair had won the 1916 election or if Tyagaraja Chettiar had been permitted to sprinkle the holy water. They were motivated to form the party because of their perceived humiliation in front of the Brahmin community rather than for the betterment of oppressed communities. So the ostensible reason for the formation of the Justice Party was the quote-unquote communal divide between Brahmins and non-Brahmins in Madras, which was allegedly caused by caste prejudices and quote-unquote Brahminical overrepresentation in government colleges and jobs. The party sought to represent the non-Brahmins of Madras and petitioned for greater representation in education and government. Undoubtedly, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, Brahmins had a strong presence in education in the state, with a large number of them enrolled in colleges. Consequently, Brahmins secured many of the most sought-after government jobs. However, their numerical representation was not statistically significant. According to C.J. Baker's book, The Politics of South India, in 1890, there were approximately 3,000 students studying in both arts and professional colleges. That means there are less than 1,000 students graduating every year in the 1980s. By 1936, the number of students had increased to about 14,000, which means that around 4,500 students were graduating every year in the 1930s. Given that the population of Madras Presidency in 1931 was around 46 million, it means that less than 1% of 1% of the population was graduating from these colleges. It's 0.01%. In the 1930s, the majority of students enrolled in both arts and professional colleges were in fact non-Brahmins. The notion that Brahmins monopolized education is unfounded. Even as far back as 1819, Governor Thomas Munro of Madras instructed his collectors to conduct a survey of schools and colleges in Madras Presidency. The survey took around 2 years and found that of the total 1,88,650 students, there were 13,561 Muslims, 42,502 Brahmins, 19,669 Vaishyas, 85,400 Shudras, and 27,518 of other castes. That was how the British classified it. So Brahmins accounted for only 22% of the student population. It's also important to note, education was crucial for Brahmins' survival as they did not have political power or access to resources to enforce a monopoly. It's also worth remembering that education as a means of economic progress is a relatively modern concept. Now let's look at the employment side. The number of Brahmin gazetted officers in 1928 was 620. In general, approximately 15,000 of the 80,000 government employees were Brahmins. According to Baker, there were 10,237 students in the first grade colleges in 1931. But the number of government posts available was only 29,081. In 1927, the Staff Selection Board had to choose 467 people. But even if they had selected all non-Brahmin candidates who met the minimum qualifications, they still could not have fulfilled the required quota. It was evident even then that there was a shift in the trend during that time. The Tamil Brahmins began relocating to cities both within and outside of Tamil Nadu, as most of them had been residing in rural areas during the early 1900s. As of 2001, only around 4.3% of them lived in villages, which would increase to 5.6% if non-Tamil Brahmins are also included. The Tamil Brahmins had to sell their land holdings to finance their education, resulting in a decline in their property ownership. To summarize, the Tamil Brahmins took advantage of the opportunities provided by the British government without pressuring anyone to help them succeed. The Justice Party's contention that Brahmins were the prime villains is not historically or sociologically accurate. So, Marxist scholar Rajan Kurukal writes the following in Social Formations of Early South India. Brahmanization of social stratification was a historically and culturally contingent effect rather than the result of a conspiratorial scheming. The Brahmanas do not seem to have manipulated the political space for ordering the differential relations of production into the hierarchy of jatis. The notion of pure self and impure other, which originally constituted the basis of jati, was tribal and a part of the horizontal social division of the primeval kind. The formation of jatis, along with the domestic groups of hereditary occupations, was also not Brahminical. In short, what is Brahminical is not jati but the notion of hierarchy. Hierarchy as such, however, is not merely a notional construct of Brahmanism, but is derived from the objective conditions related to the forces and relations of production. Now, this is a Marxist view, not a Shastic view. Regrettably, the Justice Party and its followers were unable to view the issue from this angle. Brahmins were initially even barred from becoming party members. In 1929, a resolution was adopted recommending the removal of restrictions on Brahmins joining the organization. This resolution was opposed by Periyar and R.K. Shanmugam Chetty and failed. They, like Hitler did with the German Jews, attributed the suffering of the non-Brahmins to elaborate conspiracies and cunning maneuvers by the Brahmins. The party lifted the ban on Brahmin members only in October 1934. Now, some of you are going to accuse me of violating Godwin's law, but there is a reason I bring up Hitler, and the connection will be clear as the speech goes on. So perhaps this shouldn't be surprising, considering the fact that the Dravidian movement has its origins in the ideas of the British Christian evangelist Robert Caldwell, whose statue has been in Chennai's Marina Beach since 1968. Bishop Caldwell established and propagated the concept of the Dravidian race identity with the intention of converting native Hindus to Christianity. His successor, G.U. Pope, further secularized classical Tamil Hindu texts to align them with Christianity. The Justice Party later nurtured the ideas that were propagated by the two Christian missionaries. The term Dravida originally refers to the southern region of India, and it meant a land surrounded by water on three sides. Water is Drava, so that's where Dravida comes from. Rabindranath Tagore uses the word Dravida in the national anthem to refer to South India. However, Robert Caldwell and G.U. Pope gave different meanings to the term Dravida and used it to develop the Dravida separatist theory, which opposed Sanskrit and the Aryan invasion theory. According to their interpretation, the Tamil language was associated with non-Brahmin community of Shudras in opposition to the Aryans of North India. The Justice Party rose at a time when, as part of their divide it impera policy, the British aimed to counter the influence of Mylapurian Brahmins by appointing non-Brahmins to government positions. Identity politics based on non-Brahmin status was stoked by the British with the aim of cultivating some groups that believed that British rule was more beneficial to them than an independent government led by the Congress would be. Accordingly, the Justice Party's ideology was rooted in the Non-Brahmin Manifesto that was published in 1916 by the South Indian People's Association. The manifesto pledged the loyalty of non-Brahmins to the British colonial government and rejected the national freedom movement and the Home Rule movement under Annie Besant. The manifesto was criticized by The Hindu, a nationalist newspaper at the time, and The New Age, the Home Rule movement's newspaper. The Justice Party, like the Muslim League, was against the freedom struggle and opposed the idea of self-government and freedom from British rule. They openly supported British rule and did not believe in a united India. The Justice Party did not participate in the Central Legislative Assembly, which was the national parliamentary body at the time, and instead focused on obtaining communal representation and participating in the political process from 1916 to 1920. In the non-cooperation movement's period, it joined the European newspaper Madras Mail in opposing and denouncing Gandhi and the nationalists. Sir Tyagaraya Chetty, the party's president from 1916 to 1924, expressed his disapproval of political prisoners on the floor of the assembly, which was met with opposition from nationalists. The Justice Party government at the time was led by the Raja of Panagal, and they went to the extent of banning the publication and distribution of poems written by Indian nationalist Subramanya Bharati. Both T.M. Nair and P.T. Tyagaraja Chettiar approved of the Rowlatt Act and the subsequent government action against the popular agitation at Jallianwala Bagh, where hundreds of people were shot to death in an act of barbarism by the British. In January 1919, during the deliberation of the Rowlatt Act legislation by the Government of India, T.M. Nair questioned the reason for Montagu and Chelmsford to release their report when the findings of the Rowlatt Committee were already available. Tyagaraya Chetty commented on the publication of the Rowlatt report saying, To what community belong most of the persons who find a bad eminence in that report? Who is the central figure among them? He is none other than the Brahmin gentleman, Tilak, who has been elected to the presidential chair of the next session of the Indian National Congress. The party's opposition to Brahmins and its anti-Brahmin attitude shaped many of its policies and ideas. The Justice Party's support for the British action at Jallianwala Bagh exposed their isolation from the rest of India and their disregard for the interests of Indians and India as a whole. Rather than opposing the government's actions, the party was more focused on securing a protected position in the new legislative councils proposed in the Montagu-Chelmsford report. The Justice Party, which had previously staunchly supported the British Empire, softened its position ever so slightly in the mid-1920s in order to better compete with the more popular Swaraj Party. As part of this strategy, the Justice Party made some limited concessions, such as abandoning its previous aversion to hand spinning and paying lip service to Swadeshi economics. In 1925, the party passed a resolution supporting indigenous industries and quote-unquote Swadeshi enterprise. The aim of this shift was to bolster the Justice Party's position against Swaraj, which it was gradually losing ground to. The Justice Party's Madras branch president, C.R. Reddy, led this transformation and even incorporated the term Swaraj into the party's constitution. But for the Justice Party, Swaraj signified partial self-government under British rule, not independence the way we understand it. The constitution of the Justice Party stated to obtain Swaraj for India as a component of the British Empire at as early a date as possible by all peaceful and legitimate and constitutional means. But even this was not to last. The Justice Party would eventually reverse this in the 1930s and go on to be more in favor of British rule than the British themselves. Is it possible to contend that the population of the Madras Presidency was also supportive of British rule, and thus the Justice Party behaved in this way to cater to the preferences of their electorate? Well, the huge support that Muthuramalinga Devar and Subhash Chandra Bose mobilized for the Indian National Army in Madras Presidency should suffice to put that notion to rest. But even besides that, the premise itself presumes that the Justice Party had popular support. Now, how valid is that assumption? Let's look at their electoral performance. The first Legislative Council election to Madras Presidency after the establishment of diarchical system of government by the Government of India Act 1919 was held in November 1920. The Justice Party's victory in the 1920 Legislative Council election in Madras Presidency was not due to popular support, but rather because there was a lack of organized opposition. The Indian National Congress boycotted the election due to their participation in the non-cooperation movement, leaving the Justice Party to win with no significant challengers. A. Subbarayalu Reddyar became the first Chief Minister of the presidency after the Justice Party's win. But it's worth noting how much of the population actually voted for the Justice Party. During the election in Madras Presidency, only a small portion of the population was eligible to vote due to property qualifications. Out of 12,48,156 voters, only 303,558 individuals cast their vote, which equates to a mere 0.75% of the total population of the Madras Presidency. Furthermore, the majority of eligible voters chose to boycott the election in response to the Congress's call for non-cooperation. The Hindu reported that voter turnout was as low as 12% in certain constituencies, and none of the constituencies reported polling rates higher than 25%. Additionally, many of those who did vote did not support the Justice Party. In the absence of significant opposition, the Justice Party was able to win 63 seats in a total house of 127, which included some nominated members. In 1923, the second Legislative Council election for Madras Presidency took place under the diarchical system of government. The voter turnout was higher than the previous election, and a group called the Swaraj Party, led by S. Srinivasa Iyengar, who had split from the Indian National Congress, also took part in this election. All 11 seats contested by the Swarajists were won by them, and despite winning only 11 seats, they were able to prevent the Justice Party from gaining a majority. The Justice Party ended up winning 44 seats in a house of 127, but there was no organized opposition against them in most of these seats. Despite this, the Madras Governor Willington invited the Justice Party to form the government. When a motion of no confidence was brought against the government, it mainly survived with the support of nominated members. The Hindu contended and I quote, if the official and non-nominated members are excluded, the figures reduce themselves to 44 votes cast for the ministers and 43 against it. Looked at from the angle of electorate at large, the 44 votes represented elected of 1,92,855 as against the 43 representing 2,57,144. So it is exceedingly clear that the electorate at large has given its verdict against the ministers. End quote. In November 1926, Madras Presidency held its third Legislative Council election. In this election, the Justice Party was resoundingly defeated by the Swaraj Party. However, the Swarajists declined the offer to form the government as the Indian National Congress Party had passed a resolution in its Kanpur meeting not to participate in government formation till diarchy was abolished. Consequently, the governor of Madras established an independent government led by P. Subbarayan with the assistance of appointed members. This election happened at a time of severe economic distress, precipitated by the previous government of the Justice Party. The severe drought that had occurred due to the failure of southwest and northeast monsoons had worsened the already distressed farming activities. The tax collectors and money lenders had crippled the fortunes of landless laborers, and the migration of farmers from rural areas to cities in search of jobs and livelihood had increased. It was in this context that Justice Party won barely half the number of seats the Swarajists did. Notable justice leaders like Natesa Mudaliar, O. Thanikachalam Chettiar, Kurma Venkata Reddy, and Arcot Ramasamy Mudaliar were defeated. Then in the next legislative election in September 1930, the Swarajists did not contest due to their participation in the civil disobedience movement. The Justice Party won 35 seats out of a total house of 132. The governor of Madras, George Frederick Stanley, nominated 32 non-elected members, including officials, immediately after the election and invited the Justice Party to form the government. Then in the fifth Legislative Council election, the Justice Party lost the election and the opposition Swaraj Party emerged as the single largest party. However, it refused to form the government due to its opposition to diarchy. The Justice Party retained power and formed a minority government. Major Justice Party leaders such as R.K. Shanmugam Chetty and Arcot Ramasamy Mudaliar lost their seats in this election. Now, until now, 5 elections have happened, and in all of those, Justice Party either did not face an opposition at all, or the opposition, even if they won, refused to form the government, and that is how Justice Party was able to maintain its rule. Then the Government of India Act of 1935 established a bicameral legislature in the Madras province. The act allowed for a restricted adult suffrage based on property criteria. About 7 million individuals, which amounted to approximately 15% of the Madras population, who owned land or paid urban taxes, were deemed eligible to vote, a significant increase compared to the previous act. Now, at this time, the Justice Party was perceived as a collaborator party as it supported the British government's severe actions. Its economic measures during the Great Depression of the 1930s were not well received. To put it mildly, its decision to not reduce land revenue taxes in non-zamindari regions by 12.5% was widely unpopular. Even the European-owned newspaper, the Madras Mail, which had been the champion of earlier justice governments, was sickened by the ineptitude and patronage policies of the latest Justice Party administration. On the 1st of July 1935, it wrote in its editorial, "If the Justice Party is really determined upon reorganization, the spoils system must go." The extent of the discontent against the justice government is reflected in an article of Zameen Riyot. The Justice Party has disgusted the people of this presidency like plague and engendered permanent hatred in their hearts. Everybody, therefore, is anxiously awaiting the fall of the justice regime, which they consider tyrannical, and inauguration of the Congress administration. Even old women in villages ask as to how long the ministry of the Raja of Bobili would continue. This was what was written in the article of Zameen Riyot. The Swaraj Party, which had been the Justice Party's main opposition, merged with the Indian National Congress in 1935 when the Congress decided to participate in the electoral process. Now, for the first time, the Justice Party was going to face serious opposition. In February 1937, the first Legislative Council election was held for Madras Presidency after the establishment of a bicameral legislature. Now, can anybody guess how many seats the Justice Party won in that election? Alright, so the answer is Justice Party was reduced to single digits. They won 7 seats. The Indian National Congress won a majority, marking their first electoral triumph in the presidency since the council's inception in 1920. As a result, Chakravarti Rajagopalachari was appointed as the chief minister, replacing the Justice Party, which had been reduced to single digits. The Justice Party was left in a state of political wilderness after this crushing defeat and remained so until it was taken over by E.V. Ramaswamy Periyar in 1938. It never came back to power again and eventually withdrew from electoral politics altogether in ignominy. Now, it is up to your discretion to determine whether this evidence indicates that the Justice Party had popular support or not. However, let us examine what their time in power and opposition was like. We must be fair even to those whom we are critiquing, so let us begin by acknowledging their accomplishments. The Justice Party is known for its involvement in establishing Andhra University and Annamalai University and the development of Tyagaraja Nagar in Madras during their time in government. However, there is a darker side to their tenure in office. The Justice Party, despite gaining power with the support of the depressed class in 1920, refused to fulfill its promises to this community. Instead, they used the depressed classes as a tool to mobilize their political clout to come to power, only to abandon them once in power. The prominent leader and architect of the Justice Party, Tyagaraja Chettiar, even refused to support anti-untouchability measures in 1922. This action thoroughly exposed the Justice Party's exploitation and manipulation of the depressed classes, and their status remained the same despite the party's rise to power. In May 1921, workers in the spinning department of the Buckingham and Carnatic mills, who mostly belonged to the depressed classes, went on strike to demand a wage increase, which escalated to an official strike in June. The strike was led by V. Kalyanasundara Mudaliar of the Indian National Congress, and the Congress sympathized with the workers at a meeting in Madras in July. The strike lasted for 6 months, during which the authorities used ruthless tactics to suppress the agitation. The police opened fire on 29th August, killing several workers. Of the Justice Party leaders who supported the strike, most are alleged to have only been influenced by caste identifications, while others argue that it gave the Justice Party a tool to confront the Governor's Council. A violent communal clash occurred on June 28, 1921, when a group of people attacked the Puliyantop village occupied by Dalits, burning down around 100 huts. The Justice Party's publication, Justice, attributed the riots to the supposed quote-unquote pampering of the depressed classes by the Labour Department of the Madras government. So what was their solution to that? The Justice Party abolished the Labour Department altogether. Depressed classes leader M.C. Raja, on the other hand, accused union leaders of intimidating non-participating members from joining the strike and condemned the Justice Party government led by the Raja of Panagal for its treatment of the depressed classes. M.C. Raja accused the party of engaging in, quote, high-handed poisonous action against the depressed classes community while hypocritically posing as its friend. This is a clear indictment of the Justice Party's negligence and disregard for the welfare and safety of the depressed classes community. The strike eventually ended, but most of the striking workers were not readmitted. Thus, the Justice Party's governance record was marked by broken promises and exploitation of marginalized communities. Their actions had revealed that they had used the depressed classes to gain power and to remove Brahmins from the public sphere, only to continue to discriminate against and suppress the depressed classes. The no confidence motion against them in 1923 was in fact brought by the depressed classes. The justice ministers were elitists who drew a large monthly salary, 4,333 rupees at the time, which was compared to 2,250 in the central provinces. And they did this at the height of the Great Depression. Meanwhile, they failed to initiate any housing scheme, economic aid, free education scheme, or land distribution for the depressed classes and the poor. They did not even bother to visit the depressed classes' villages to comprehend the actual dreadful conditions of their existence. The Justice Party's strategy of dividing different communities into, quote, high caste non-Brahmins, backward non-Brahmins, and untouchables, unquote, caused the party to lose credibility and identity. This caste-based approach led to the erosion of the party's support. As time passed, the Justice Party's identity became more associated with upper caste non-Brahmins rather than with untouchables, leading to a shift in the party's ideology towards an emphasis on a nebulous Dravidian identity. Dravidian leaders later suppressed the history of leaders such as M. Krishnasamy, Veerasamy, L.C. Kurusamy, Rao Bahadur Jagannathan, Annai Meenambal Sivaraj, Jyoti Venkatachalam, M.C. Raja, and Diwan Bahadur Rettamalai Srinivasan, who fought for the rights of the oppressed, all in order to appropriate credit for accomplishments that they had little to do with. Now, it is common in Tamil Nadu today to attribute the start of the reservation system based on caste to Periyar. However, contrary to the popular belief that Periyar and Justice Party implemented caste-based reservation, it was in fact Subbarayan Gauntar, when he was Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, who implemented caste-based reservations in the state. The Justice Party, on the other hand, dubbed Subbarayan Gauntar a puppet of the governor and criticized him. On August 23, 1927, the Justice Party submitted a no-confidence motion against Subbarayan, which was defeated by 56 of the 67 votes. It was C.S. Ranga Iyer who passed the Untouchability Abolition Bill in the Imperial Legislative Council, while Subbarayan Gauntar proposed the Temple Entry Bill, which sought to make it illegal and punishable to prohibit the depressed classes from entering temples. The Temple Entry Bill was not passed until the Indian National Congress came to power under Rajaji. Meanwhile, the Justice Party mocked and criticized Subbarayan's government when all of this was taking place. What did the Justice Party do? They passed the Madras Hindu Religious Endowment Act, which brought many Hindu temples under the direct control of the state government. Their management, needless to say, has remained corrupt till date. In 1939, Rajaji, the Chief Minister of Madras, introduced a Temple Entry Act, which allowed the depressed classes to enter 7 major temples in the presidency and gave trustees of other temples the authority to decide whether or not to allow entry at all. Despite receiving a warm response from the state, there was a section of people who were against it. What was the Justice Party's response to this? The Justice Party's then leader, E.V. Ramaswamy, made an appeal to the discontented factions of the community who opposed the Temple Entry Act and asked them to join the Justice Party and oppose the Congress. The Congress Party, however, stood firm, and after they came back to power in 1946, it was they who modified the act to ensure that all temples were open to every Hindu. When the Congress Party took power from the Justice Party in 1937, Dravidian politicians began to incite chaos in order to gain power. They resorted to the politics of hatred and anti-Brahminism. The introduction of Hindi language in education by the Rajagopalachari-led Congress government in 1938 provided the Dravidian ideologues with a powerful tool to gain power by spreading hate against quote-unquote Aryan colonialists. As protests erupted across the state, the Justice Party saw an opportunity to fuel violence and political unrest throughout Madras presidency. This led to the anti-Hindi agitation, which effectively brought the party under E.V. Ramaswamy's control, and he was subsequently elected as president on December 29, 1938. Under E.V. Ramaswamy's leadership, justice embraced the secession of Dravidistan. The party demanded Tamil people's right to a sovereign state, which was repeated at annual conferences in 1938 and 1940. A justice delegation demanded a separate Dravidian nation during the Cripps mission in 1942. The leadership of E.V. Ramaswamy changed the party forever. To understand how this happened, one must understand the man himself. E.V. Ramaswamy, or Periyar, came from a very rich mercantile clan. He expressed his reservations about the Temple Entry movement initiated by the Indian National Congress to eradicate the practice of untouchability with the following words, and I quote, "The attempt to promote temple entry and abolition of untouchability by the Congress leaders should not result in the tragedy of people belonging to the backward classes getting reduced to the level of scheduled castes. Instead of attempting to raise the status of Parayans, that is the scheduled castes, an attempt should not be made to reduce the status of backward classes, or what he called Shudrans, by relegating them to the level of scheduled castes. On no account should the existing status of Shudrans be reduced to the level of Parayans." This animosity towards Parayans will also be repeated in later articles and quotes from E.V. Ramaswamy. According to E.V. Ramaswamy, increases in the prices of clothes and textiles were due to, and I quote, "One of the main reasons why there is an upward trend in prices of clothes and textiles is that women belonging to the scheduled castes, or what he called in Tamil as parayachis, have started wearing blouses these days. The reason for growing unemployment in society is on account of increasing number of people belonging to the scheduled castes or parayans taking to school education and higher education. Now think about this. Here is a man who is known publicly as someone who fought for the eradication of the caste system, but he is on record expressing displeasure at people belonging to the depressed classes taking to school education, higher education, or even wearing blouses. This is the kind of person he is. EVR is also described as a great lover of the Tamil language and Tamil literature. But he is also recorded to have said this, and I quote, "For more than 40 years, I have been describing Tamil as a barbaric language. In Tamil, Kaattu Mirandi Mori, used only by barbarians. When Brahmins and the Brahmin-dominated government wanted to make Hindi a state language, I started, to a very limited extent, advocating the promotion of Tamil language only to oppose the imposition of Hindi language." EVR believed that in order to destroy Hinduism, Brahmins needed to be opposed, isolated, excommunicated, and persecuted. He believed that opposing Brahmins was equivalent to opposing Hindus and vice versa. He insulted Hindu gods, rituals, belief systems, social institutions, the institution of marriage, and the moral principles by which society was governed. During the height of his movement, E.V. Ramaswamy emphasized that Brahmins were inherently unchangeable due to their birthright. In an interview, he was asked if he believed that Brahmins were unable to have honest intentions just by being born into their caste. E.V. Ramaswamy replied in the affirmative, stating that they were inherently incapable of honesty. E.V. Ramaswamy also made a statement that to eradicate caste discrimination, it was necessary to burn pictures of Nehru and Gandhi, as well as the Constitution of India. If these measures did not yield results, he asserted that Brahmins should be physically attacked and their homes should be burned. In an article published in Vidudalai, the official newspaper of his party, E.V. Ramaswamy would go on to make a highly misogynistic claim, and I quote, "Had the British continued for another 10 years, more than half of the Brahmin women would have been ours, and Tamils would have been their husbands, and the dominating caste would have been destroyed by more than half. Only after Brahmin women had started chasing our boys did the Brahmin men become very angry with the British." End quote. His misogyny even extended to his first wife Nagamai when she wanted to visit the temple and EVR was unable to persuade her through logical argument. So he went to some of his friends and showed them his wife, claiming that she was a new sex worker in the town, and urged them to convince her to comply with their desires. As a result, they harassed and stalked her from the temple, causing her to stop attending. Later, Nagamai discovered that her husband had played a cruel trick on her using his friends. During a visit to Italy, E.V. Ramaswamy was inspired by the formation and structure of the National Fascist Party led by Mussolini and his paramilitary army, the Black Shirts. He was impressed by the discipline and loyalty of the Black Shirts and saw it as a model to create a simple group of men for his own Dravidian movement. Mussolini was the fascist leader of Italy during World War II, known for his violent and oppressive tactics in the name of promoting a superior race. The Black Shirts were a notorious paramilitary force known for their brutal treatment of their own countrymen and people in other lands. This is what Periyar sought to emulate, and needless to say, Periyar's Dravida Kazhagam still wears black shirts. E.V. Ramaswamy Periyar also wrote approvingly of the Nazi regime in Germany and its treatment of the Jews. He went on to compare the Jews and the Brahmins of Madras. Now I'm going to quote to you his own words from the newspaper Kudiyarasu, published on the date 20th March 1938. "The Jews don't care and have no responsibility to society, but only focus on getting close to the rulers and then getting into power and torturing and killing others. The Tamil Brahmins, whom he calls Papans, also do the same. Jews' stories and philosophy are totally against rationalism and rationalists. Similarly, the Papans' religious stories are also irrational. Do you not see that there is a big similarity? The Jews are not courageous. Instead of ruling through valor, they are experts in sectarian and division and ruling. Since Brahmins are exactly like this, they have no courage as well. You tell me, isn't there a possibility the Jews and the Brahmins are the same? In appearance and color also, Jews and Brahmins are very similar. Based on the quotes above, one can surmise the character and moral worldview of Periyar. So, what happened when he took control of the Justice Party? In 1942, Periyar was advocating for a separate Dravida Nadu or Dravidistan. He led a delegation of representatives from major non-Brahmin, non-Dalit castes of Tamil districts of Madras Presidency to meet with the Cripps mission when it arrived in India. The delegation desired for the Madras Presidency to separate from the Indian Union, but they were not confident that they could attain this through a legislative assembly vote or plebiscite. As a result, they requested separate electorates on such a scale as to virtually guarantee them a majority in the province. Even Cripps, who was sympathetic to them, says in his report, this was a wholly impractical suggestion, and it was not possible within any democratic method at all to give them that majority which they desired. They appreciated this situation, but they were nevertheless insistent that something should be done to assist them. I pointed out as sympathetically as possible that in the existing circumstances, there was nothing we could do. Now, once Periyar realized that he could not gerrymander his way to a majority, he turned to a second strategy, which he was working on. Periyar and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, were friends for a few years and they had a close relationship. Jinnah had the goal of creating a separate state for Muslims and had the support of an overwhelming majority of Indian Muslims. The difference between Jinnah and Periyar is that Periyar, on the other hand, wanted a separate Dravidistan, but he did not have the support of an overwhelming majority of Tamils or Dravidians. In 1940, on June 8th, Bhimrao Ambedkar, Jinnah, and E.V. Ramaswamy met in Bombay. E.V. Ramaswamy extended his support to Jinnah's Day of Deliverance and called upon the party as well as all Dravidians to celebrate December 22 of that year, which was Jinnah's Day of Deliverance, on a grand scale to, quote, rid the country of the menace of the Congress, unquote. They made several agreements during that meeting, among which were that in April or May 1940, Jinnah and Ambedkar would tour Tamil districts for an entire month to support the demand for Dravidistan, and that EVR and his followers would support the Muslim cause and work together with them. They vowed to create even more problems for Congress. But when Jinnah was asked by Periyar to speak for Dravidistan on 9th August 1944, Jinnah wrote back to him on 17th August 1944 saying, I have always had much sympathy for the people of Madras, 90% of whom are non-Brahmins, and if they desire to establish their Dravidistan, it is entirely for your people to decide on the matter. I can say no more. I cannot speak on your behalf. I have made my position clear to you. I have noticed that in your activities you have been indecisive. I can only speak for Muslim India. The Justice Party, which had captured power under dubious circumstances in 1920 on an anti-Brahmin plank, had gradually lost the support of many communities and came to represent only a few non-Brahmin upper castes, alienating the depressed classes as well as the Muslims. The representatives of the latter two groups refused to back the Justice Party's Dravidistan demand. EVR chose to deceptively publish the last few lines of Jinnah's letter to show that his secessionist demand had Jinnah's support. When Jinnah's attention was drawn to the publication of the extracts of the correspondence in Madras papers, Jinnah released the entire correspondence for the information of the public so that there might be no misunderstanding in the matter. Now, if you look at the slides, these are the letters that EVR wrote to Jinnah and Jinnah wrote to EVR. Please note the dates. They are in August 1944. This was at a time when it took a few days for letters to be delivered. This will become important as the speech goes along. At a meeting in Madras on September 23, 1944, Ambedkar explained the reasons for the failure of the non-Brahmin movement in Madras. He said, the major reason is that they, the non-Brahmins, never bothered about the poor in villages who are 90% of the non-Brahmins. The non-Brahmin party in Madras did not worry about the agricultural laborers. Now, within days of receiving Jinnah's letter, E.V. Ramaswamy abruptly pulls the Justice Party out of electoral politics and transforms it into a quote-unquote social movement called the Dravidar Kazhagam. He had been running the party as a personal fiefdom and hadn't convened the party's executive committee in the preceding 4 years. He suddenly convened it to pass resolutions to compel members to resign nominated and appointed posts. This convention was on the 27th of August 1944, within perhaps 4 to 5 days of him having received the letter from Jinnah. In that speech, which was in Salem, E.V. Ramaswamy imperiously declared, "In a way, I was doing things as I pleased as president, and I could not be consulting too many opinions. I believed myself to be right. As a president, I could only take the lead, and it was for others to do the work." Now, we must wonder what explains this abrupt decision. Is it because E.V. Ramaswamy was certain he couldn't hold off a Congress victory without the support of the depressed classes or the disproportionately represented Muslim faction, besides the Europeans and nominated members? Did he play for time so as to build strength and seize power as it gets transferred? I will leave that to you to judge. But E.V. Ramaswamy is on the record wanting the British to continue ruling India, or at the very least, Madras province alone. He declared August 15, 1947, our Independence Day, as a black day, a day of mourning. He stated that Dravidians would be ruled by Northerners and the Aryans, whom he asserted were dominant in the Congress party after independence. In a Vidudalai article published on July 27, 1947, mere weeks before independence and partition, E.V. Ramaswamy claimed that the Brahmins whom he referred to as Aryans residing in the Dravida land separate from Hindustan would be accountable if a Noakhali-like incident took place there. Now, this was a reference to the Noakhali riots against Hindus in what is now Bangladesh in 1946. He was suggesting that something similar would happen in Madras. These were perilous times. We know what happened in West Punjab and East Bengal mere weeks after E.V. Ramaswamy issued this threat. If even a few extremists had acted upon Periyar's instigation towards violence, it could have led to catastrophic consequences. One shudders to imagine what could have happened to the people if Periyar's vision of Dravidistan had become a reality. The current Dravidian elites remain a group comprised of privileged castes. Although it is quite large, it is essentially still a closed group. Let me end with a quote from Raymond Williams that encapsulates what the Dravidian hegemony has now become. I quote, "A lived hegemony is always a process. It is not, except analytically, a system or a structure. It is a realized complex of experiences, relationships, and activities with specific and changing pressures and limits. In practice, that is, hegemony can never be singular. Its internal structures are highly complex, as can readily be seen in any concrete analysis. Moreover, and this is crucial, reminding us of the necessary thrust of the concept, it does not just passively exist as a form of dominance. It has continually to be renewed, recreated, defended, and modified. It is also continuously resisted, limited, altered, challenged by pressures not at all its own. And my humble submission to you is, resist it we must." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I just have two questions. You may respond in brief.
Sure.
Why most important leaders left DK, Dravida Kazhagam, and formed? What were the reasons? And second is, what is the status of Dravida Kazhagam as of now? I know I belong to Tamil Nadu. I know it exists. Veeramani is heading it.
Right.
And they have a good relationship all along with the DMK.
Right.
Just if you can throw your impression on it.
So to clarify your question, when you say why did leaders leave the Dravida Kazhagam, do you mean when they left in 1949 to form the DMK, or do you mean when earlier Justice Party leaders left in the 1920s?
1949.
1949. All right. So this is a very controversial event. So what happened is that Periyar in 1949 announced that he was marrying the woman that he had raised, adopted daughter, but he said he proclaimed that he was going to marry her so that his justification was that she would then be able to inherit his property, and there is no other means for him to make that happen. Now, this created a huge scandal across Madras, and it was the spur for many leaders of the Dravidar Kazhagam at the time to leave the party. But it was, I would argue, not the only reason why it happened. The DMK was formed by Annadurai, C.N. Annadurai, who was one of Periyar's top lieutenants, and he had dissented from some of Periyar's decisions even before. When Periyar called 1947 a black day, C.N. Annadurai came out and said, I do not agree with this. It is a great day for us all as Indians. We have achieved self-rule and we must celebrate this. Annadurai also opposed Periyar's decision to stay out of electoral politics, and he believed that once power had been transferred to the Indians, that they must participate in electoral politics and seize power in order to achieve their Dravidistan. And he believed that participating in elections was the means to do that. So these were some of the fundamental disagreements between them, and a very large faction agreed with C.N. Annadurai. So later on, when Periyar announced his second marriage, that was the pretext under which the party broke, and the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, the DMK, was formed. The DMK contested elections for several years. They managed to become the single largest opposition in 1962. And interestingly, at that point, Periyar was campaigning against the DMK. In 1967, the DMK comes to power for the first time in what was then called Madras State. This was after another series of violent anti-Hindi agitations in 1965. And on the back of this movement, DMK comes to power. And since then, one or the other Dravidian party has ruled the state. But again, we must analyze the election results. In 1967, DMK was not the single largest party in terms of vote share. It was the Congress. But somehow the narrative has become that the Congress was so unpopular at the time and the DMK faced a wave election. What really happened was that the DMK had two powerful allies. One was the Communist Party, which was led by Ramamurthy at that time. And the other one, of course, was Rajagopalachari's Swatantra Party. And both of them were opposed to the Congress. And it was their 10% vote share that put DMK over the top. And so that is a big part of the journey of how the Dravidian movement then became hegemonic in Madras State, which they renamed as Tamil Nadu. And since then, a whole mythology has been created around its own origins, the Justice Party, and all of Tamil history itself has been reinterpreted through a Dravidian lens. So at the time, even in 1967, Periyar was opposed to the DMK, but later on, Periyar was co-opted by that movement. And Periyar died in 1974, by which time he was on very friendly terms with the DMK, who conferred him with awards which essentially they made up. So the DK and the DMK have, since the death of Periyar, been, it is akin to an ideological parent to the DMK, and that is the relationship they've consistently had. The DK is able to take stronger ideological stances that the DMK might not for electoral reasons, but the DK functions as an intellectual vanguard of the Dravidian ideology and its movement. It is similar to how the Bolsheviks under Lenin functioned. So this is the relationship, and it is a symbiotic relationship. The DK gets a lot of patronage from the DMK, and every time the DMK comes to power, of course, now the DMK has co-opted many media organizations and much of the academia and the narrative-making institutions of society. So that gives the DK, which of course has never won an election, an outsized voice in the discourse.
Thank you for the talk, Deepak. I had a couple of questions. First of all, could you give us a more clearer picture of what Madras province actually looked like geographically at that point? And kind of related to that, while you were naming some of the names of the earlier Justice Party leaders, I heard a lot of names that were very recognizably Telugu names, like Naidu and Reddy. So what is the story there, and how did that part of the movement either die out, or because so you can go into
So this is the map of Madras Presidency. As you can see, it covers not only most of Andhra, but even parts of what is now Telangana, goes all the way up to Odisha, parts of Karnataka, and of course some parts of Kerala, which is why you also hear names like Nair. And it was not just Madras. So we often in the South have this criticism where North Indians tend to think of us all as Madrasis. That actually comes from the fact that at the time, much of South India was in fact known as Madras. So it doesn't come from a place of discrimination, or it's not intended as a slur from what I understand it. So this is what the map looked like. There was Mysore state, there was Hyderabad state, which went all the way up to Madhya Pradesh. There was Bombay presidency, which also is very large. It in fact covered what is today Sindh in Pakistan. And then there are smaller princely states like Travancore and Cochin. So this was the map at that time. So if you look at it, Vishakhapatnam, Kakinada, Masulipattnam, all of these Telugu areas are in fact part of Madras. So the chief ministers of Madras, let me show you that list. You will find most of the names initially were Telugu names. So the first one is a Reddiyar, obviously a Telugu name. Munuswami Naidu, of course. Then not sure about Ranga Rao, Venkatareddy Naidu. And in fact, during independence, we had Omantur P. Ramaswamy Reddiyar, again a Telugu speaker. And it is only at this point when Andhra Pradesh becomes a separate state after Potti Sriramulu's protests, that is when the Telugu role in... So it was only when in 1953 Andhra Pradesh became a separate state that a lot of the Telugus who lived in Madras moved to Andhra. So Madras city itself at that point was more than 20% Telugu speakers. Now it is a lot less. So there was a significant Telugu presence in that city for a very long time, and the reorganization of states changed the demographics in that sense. So a lot of the early members of the Justice Party were in fact Telugu speakers, but by 1937, when the Justice Party loses to the Congress, all of the Telugu leaders of the Justice Party have either left because of factional fights, or they have died, or they have retired from politics. They've become completely disillusioned with the Justice Party to the point where there is no support whatsoever for Dravidistan outside of the Tamil-speaking areas. And Periyar never had any traction in the Telugu-speaking areas of Madras province.
I want to know why Dravid movement didn't get that much traction in Karnataka and Telugu areas.
That's a good question. We can only speculate on it because you cannot prove a negative. But my sense is that it was the Justice Party's politics was always based on playing one caste against another, and that required a certain caste dynamic, so to speak, so that they could have this broad rubric of Dravidian under which certain groups are able to dominate. And if you look at land holding patterns, if you look at violent crime, a lot of these things, those patterns have still been very stable in terms of what they were in the 1920s to what they are now. So I don't think the social structure of Telugu society or Kannada society was conducive to this particular movement, especially at that period of time. For reasons, so I mean, we had Karnataka's elections just today. Now, every election analyst will tell you that there are two groups in that state which are very, very important, and it is how those two groups vote that determine how the state is governed. Everyone knows the names of the two groups, right? Lingayats and Vokaligas. So, because there was that clear divide between them, you could not unify much of that identity into a broader Dravidian identity and then say, oh, we are Dravidians and they are Brahmins and they are Aryan invaders. So that did not happen. Another argument that I've seen is that Telugu as a language is much more Sanskritized. And because that is the case, the culture itself was just not conducive to this kind of movement, which was fundamentally anti-Sanskrit.
Perhaps Caldwell had a role.
I'm sure he did. So Caldwell wrote a book called The Comparative Grammars of the Dravidian languages or something like that. And I mean, this was completely pseudoscience. He determined whether some jatis were Mongoloids based on the length of their nose, and then attributed IQ and various traits based on that. So this was race science at that time, and it was a field that was in vogue. We would read that today and find it outrageous, but a lot of the assumptions about who was a Dravidian and who was an Aryan, all of those were formed based on what Caldwell had written at that time.